Hello friends and followers of Melba. My name is Bojana and together with Adriana we are hosting today's meeting, a Studio Komplekt. We are happy to welcome you to this special edition of the series of events Melba Live. We started back in 2017 and now this is our 13th edition. On this special occasion we decided to make something different, and instead of featuring 3 creative practitioners sharing insights from their work process, we are putting the spotlight on Monocle and Nolan Giles. Monocle is by far one of the best established international media. It has set a high standard when it comes to picking up interesting stories and presenting innovative topics and trends from around the globe. But before we delve into the sweet part of the evening, a few organizational things from me. You are more than encouraged to send us your questions to our guest speaker Nolan Giles in the Zoom meeting chat or to post them as a comment under the live stream in Facebook. And we will ask the question during our Q&A session. Otherwise, for eliminating all distractions, please stay muted if you are watching us on Zoom. Last words from me before I give the floor to Adriana. Once more, we are entering this exciting adventure of Melba Live events hand in hand with our partners from Fashion Days. This is a website which selects and features some of the best fashion brands online. Have a look at their new campaign. Enjoy!
Носи си хубавите дрехи. Нищо, че утре ще имаш по-добър повод. Времето ще бъде по-подходящо. Или ще те видят хора. Защото утре пак ще кажеш утре. Носи си хубавите дрехи. Не утре, днес. Всеки ден. Fashion Days.
So he joins us from the Zurich offices of the globally out branch Monocle Media. He was born in Queensland, Australia, in a British Australian family, graduated journalism and started out as a music journalist, which maybe have inclined him unconsciously towards the podcast sphere later on in his professional career. He writes articles on pertinent contemporary developments in design and architecture, and also hosts the radio show Monocle on Design, soon to be hitting his 500th episode. Congratulations on that, actually. If you haven't tuned into it yet, do so. You will be hooked for life, I promise you. It's one of my favorite shows, and I dearly wait for the next episodes. It covers pressing themes and digs out little-known or discussed perspectives on design and architecture. Some of the latest editions of the show touch upon curious themes like pioneering sustainability in fashion, designing for sleep, for a better nation even, or for political activism, and many more. Nolan Giles has been part of the Monocle team for 7 years now. The globally present and active media has been running since 2007, when it was launched as a magazine to provide a briefing on global affairs, businesses, culture, design, and much more. Today, Monocle is published 10 times a year as a magazine, sells more than 80,000 copies per issue, and has 24,000 subscribers and growing. Before we give Nolan the floor or the screen, as you like it, I'll just put a quick video about Monocle, just in case you have missed something about this great media, which I hardly doubt it, but the video is really nice.
It all starts with a story. A mayor who's revitalising a city, an entrepreneur who's shaking up a sector, a head of state who's reimagining nationhood, or a musician defining a new sound. For over a decade, Monocle has been venturing across the world to meet the people, chronicle the developments, and capture the stories that fuel our unique take on global affairs, business, media, the arts, design, fashion, and consumer culture. At the core, Monocle is an international media venture with distribution in over 80 countries. We offer a single magazine edition to the market as we believe a smart global audience wants the same take on the world no matter where they work or reside. We also produce seasonal newspapers and a series of annual titles because our readers like it when we go in depth and our brand partners are attracted to our premium environments to showcase their products and services. On the publishing side, we've also developed a book business and in 2020 launched our own independent imprint. Monocle is a round-the-clock news-gathering operation, twin-headquartered in London and Zurich, and with bureaus spanning Tokyo, Hong Kong, Toronto and Los Angeles. Over 100 correspondents, writers and editors feed into our flagship Monocle 24 radio station, location broadcasts, short-form films and daily Monocle Minute bulletins, as well as dedicated weekend editions. Since launch in 2007, we've built up a loyal and thoughtful subscriber base. As our readers like to meet and mingle, we host conferences and summits and have a rapidly expanding cafe and kiosk business for our engaged and well-travelled audience. And for dedicated followers, we have a full range of products and a global collection of shops to service our well-made wares. 10 years on, our mission is simple: to be recognised as the world's most respected premium media outlet. Monocle, keeping an eye and an ear on the world.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for the welcome. Just give me a thumbs up if everything's working okay at my end. Yes, cool. Okay. I'm going to share my screen now so I can bring up my presentation. Just bear with me. And then can I get like another thumbs up if we're all good? Beautiful. Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here and to be able to talk to all of you. That introduction video explains a lot about Monocle, and I'm very glad that we have it because it's a very kind of complicated team and a complicated kind of way of doing things. But essentially, at the end of the day, we're talking about quality of life in Monocle magazine, and we're trying to kind of promote the idea of, how we can do things a little bit better across the board. So when we're talking about politics, we try to take an optimistic view on the world rather than dwelling on all the negative news. We tend to talk about the mayors and the politicians who are doing the right thing, who are making our cities better, making our countries better. And so it makes it a pretty pleasant working environment for us all here. I'm based in Zurich. My role is a senior editor, so I look after a large amount of things across Monocle, whether that's in books or on radio. But my speciality, I guess, is design, which I'm going to be talking to you guys about today. So without further ado, I'll jump into this presentation. What I was very keen to talk about essentially is how Monocle, if I can make this work. I'm getting some strange noises here. Just bear with me for 1 second. Oh, this is not good. There we go. Beautiful. All right. Thank you for that. Sorry. So essentially, I want to kind of talk about design in Monocle through a few different lenses, because we cover it across various sections of the magazine. But the thing I think that affects us most in our day-to-day lives, everyone, I guess, listening to this or watching this, and myself, is really the home and the city. And obviously right now we've been spending a lot more time at home than we usually have. And for Monocle, this is something we've been talking about for a very long time. And as you can see from the covers of a couple of design issues that we've done of the magazine, we think home matters, and we've championed this on the cover. The reason we think home matters is because these are environments that can have such a huge impact on our lives, but are often kind of, in a way, maybe not thought about and certainly taken for granted. And we see, in terms of design, a lot of magazines out there in the market that talk about interior design and the home as something that's almost like unapproachable. It's very precious. You see photographs of home environments in fancy interior design magazines, and you think, wow, that's very beautiful furniture, but would you like to live in these kind of homes? And would living in this home make you a happier person? So that's kind of the Monocle perspective, is essentially to look at it from that lens, how your home can make you happier, how your home can make you healthier. And I think what we've been able to all realize over the last year is that, a few good elements for home design can really go a long way in improving our quality of life. So I'm going to start by talking about homes, and then I think we might step outside the home and move into the city, which is another arena that Monocle really kind of likes to champion in terms of design and designing it better. So I thought to kind of try and make things interesting, I would kind of run through some rules. But first of all, I'd like to kind of introduce you to Monocle's view of what essentially is a great home. We've published books. We've published a book on cozy homes. We've talked about, I guess, residential design in almost every aspect of the magazine. And what we always come back to is this idea of livability. I mean, who wouldn't want to be, in this house with this nice old lady here drinking a coffee that's in California? But essentially, I think the aspects of what makes a good home design is really one that makes the most of the environment it's around. So, I mean, even looking at these pictures, you can see that every home is so light filled. The design has allowed for sunlight to kind of drench these rooms and make the most of the natural light. And as we'll see, as we dive into these quick rules, these are the kind of things that define what I believe and what Monocle believes is good home design. So we're going to start off in my favorite city, because this is where I'm from, Brisbane, Australia. And this is a home that really encapsulates a lot of good ideas that we really need in our kind of planet right now as we develop, as the world gets hotter. And it's essentially the rule, I would say, is to keep things breezy if you're thinking about home design. So this place, even though Brisbane, in the summertime, the temperature can get up to like 35 degrees, 38 degrees, because of the way that they've created this space and all of these volumes and openings for wind and air, it doesn't require air conditioning. Firstly, that's amazing because it's good for the environment. It's better for the planet. We're not, the house isn't fully charged up and powered by air conditioning. Secondly, it's just a nicer environment to be in. If you look at these photos, I mean, this girl here with the little puppy is definitely enjoying herself there with the breeze and the beautiful greenery passing through the house. And it's not a difficult thing to do. This is one thing that we do talk about with home design and Monocle. It's not essentially you need to be the smartest, most amazing engineer to create these places. You just have to think about what's available and how to make the most of it. And this house in Brisbane, Australia, certainly makes the most of the breezy weather, the warmth, and just exemplifies how you can create a house that doesn't draw on air conditioning and creates a more livable environment inside. So we'll go to the next one, which is another really simple trick, I suppose, if you're thinking about residential design, and that's to just use natural materials as much as possible. I've said use warm natural materials, but all natural materials tend to be warm. And if you look at this place, this is actually the residence of an amazing ceramicist in Finland. The village is called Fiskars, and she's basically commissioned an architect to create this timber home in the countryside. It's an amazing place, but all these tiles that you see on the wall, she's developed herself in her own, pottery workshop. She's applied them to the room. And I think it's this kind of, this idea and this sense of creating grounded design. So when you're surrounded by natural materials in a home environment, you tend to feel more relaxed. You tend to feel like, what's the right word for it? You're certainly more relaxed, and in a way you do feel healthier. And we've done many stories in Monocle on the idea of building with timber. And as you can see, this draws on a lot of timber, and we've heard from residents in timber homes how their children with asthma suddenly aren't suffering as badly. It's just, at the end of the day, it's something that just should make sense. Like we should be surrounded by natural materials. We should be in the natural environment, and therefore it makes our living environment better. So this is a very, very fine example of drawing upon as many natural materials as possible. The next one is still related to being grounded, and that's this idea of greenery. And I think that sometimes people can get so worried about how their home can be a beautifully designed environment. But actually, some of the things that make it the nicest are the things that don't cost very much. And I think it's this period that we've been in over the last year of being at home, and many of us have been home alone, in these lockdown situations, and having other life in your house, having plants in your house, having greenery to care for and look after. It's a really uplifting and very easy way to create a joyous environment in the home. So we tend to look at in Monocle a lot in greenery, and we'll move into that a little bit further on when we look at cities and how to make cities more livable environments. A lot of it just has to do with planting a lot of trees and creating beautiful green spaces. This point, I think, is probably one of the more important points, and something that we champion a lot in Monocle. The reason being is that at the end of the day, you want to fill your home. You want to make your home, a livable place. You might not necessarily be able to afford everything you need, but our approach, I think, in terms of designing for the home, is to think about the longevity of everything inside it. This is good, obviously, for the people that live there, because you get a piece of furniture that you can rely on, that's timeless, that doesn't age, but also, it's better for the planet at the end of the day if we're buying something once and well. And, looking at this home, which was the home of a famous Danish designer and architect called Borger Morgensen, he designed all these pieces of furniture that are in the house in the 1950s, and he helped shape the home. He built a lot of it. He designed the architecture. This is, photographed a couple of years ago, and it's so magical to think that, this thing is like 70 years old almost, but you want to move into it and live in it today. And I don't think it's an unachievable thing in design to create these types of environment. You just have to think in the long term. And yeah, sure, it's more expensive in the beginning to think about spending more on something that's better made. But if you're thinking about being a responsible designer, I think it's important to have that sort of mindset. So that's our kind of philosophy, and I guess the same applies to things like fashion as well. Monocle magazine, we're not really about championing every new trend and buying everything because it's great for now. We're much more interested in what pair of shoes do I want to invest in and have in my life, and take them to be repaired and really cherish them and draw some sort of sense of meaning out of this object. And I think that's a pretty good philosophy. The final design tip, I guess, for the home, or the design element that really informs Monocle's ideas, is this thing about lighting. I've said light it right, because so often in interior design, people fail to kind of nail this crucial element, which is really about creating an environment that you love being in. The home can be an amazing place during the day, with natural light coming in through the windows, especially if the house has been designed to really let the light in. But often when the sun goes down and we still want to enjoy our environment, we're stuck with very bad lighting. A lot of lighting designers tell me that they think they should almost ban ceiling lights altogether. They don't see it as a very kind of beautiful or elegant way to light up a home at all. It's just what we've been stuck with because of a legacy of building, whereas every new house has lighting on the ceiling. But actually, this idea of lighting that's more directional, that can kind of highlight something, whether that is the dining table or whether that is a nice cozy corner of the home, and produce something that's more flattering for the people within it. It's not a bad thing. So lighting is very important to us here at Monocle. So which brings me to the city. So I'm thinking I should be going okay for time. So in terms of Monocle's output with design, as I've mentioned, we really like to explore people's homes. We like to document the way that they live, and we like to tell these stories visually through beautiful photography, and hopefully through good words and reporting as well, because it's something that we can all relate to. And for most of us, especially today, the city is equally as important as an environment that we're around and we need to make better. Everyone needs, a beautifully designed home. Everyone needs to have a kind of a sense of warmth, a sense of security within their home. But really, we choose to live in cities today because this is where most of us work. This is where the action kind of takes place. But we shouldn't really sacrifice much from living in the city. If anything, we're bringing a lot more people together, a lot more good ideas together, a lot more creativity together. And Monocle really kind of values this idea of how to create a livable city. So every year for our summer edition, which is our July-August Monocle issue, as you can see here on the covers, we delve into the city. We ask ourselves what makes a great city, what makes a well-designed city, what makes a city that we want to live in, and we always do our most livable cities, and it changes from year to year, but it's similar cities that tend to win in the end. Places like Copenhagen, places like here in Zurich, places like Tokyo, where really the city planners and the local authorities really put such an effort into designing and developing places that people want to live in. So with that in mind, I've kind of created another little rule book of just 5 rules that make a big difference in urban design. So I'll move on to them. The first one is this idea about reuse, which is so important today. We live in cities, and it's very expensive, and it's very bad, I guess, for the environment to want to change and repurpose them, knocking down big buildings. We see it all the time because, you know, the land value has increased because more and more people have found a neighborhood desirable, which is the exact case in this development here in Copenhagen, which I wanted to highlight because essentially this was an old car park. It still is an old car park, but because of the attractiveness of its harborside location and the fact that so many developers have wanted to build houses here because people want to live here, at the end of the day, they're stuck with this big ugly car park. So they thought, well, you know, how can we make this better without knocking it down and building something new? So essentially what they've done is they created a beautiful facade along the side of it, which you can't really see, to make it, you know, not ugly for all the people that are paying a lot of money to live here. And then they've put this remarkable kind of park on the top, which just shows you that with, you know, an old car park, you can create something that has such value to a neighborhood. It has such value to the people that live here. Everyone can use it as their own playground, their own space within the city. So whether that's, you know, an old modernist hospital in somewhere like Brussels that's been converted into a shared working space, or whether that's you know, something much grander like the Tate Modern in London, which was an old power station that's become, you know, one of the world's most important galleries. We really, really like to champion this idea of reuse, and we think it's something that developers all around the world should really think about when they want to change their cities. Sure, it's easy to knock something down and rebuild, but maybe the creative way is to look at it and think, how can we change this building and make it better? Or for this example, you don't need to change anything. This was one of my favorite stories that I've written for Monocle, because it took me to this beautiful bridge in Budapest in the middle of summer, which isn't a bad thing, but this is kind of an example of how we can actually work with the existing design in our city and create something new out of it. So what happened with this was this bridge was closed, part of the road, near the bridge was closed for repair one summer. So the bridge was unoccupied. So kind of a local creative group decided, you know, let's make something happen on this bridge. And they organized these kind of parties on the bridge, and they had like yoga, and they just had like super good vibes. And it became so popular with locals in Budapest. And also because of the fact it's on a bridge and not really near any houses, people were able to kind of have a good time and shout and, you know, laugh or whatever, and no one was complaining. So in a way, they created this perfect public space out of something that already existed. But then obviously the bridge needs to go back to its original use, which is a motorist bridge. And when this happened, the groups basically went to the city and said, look, why don't you give us our bridge back, or give us the bridge for 2 weekends every month over the summer, and we'll create festivals on the bridge. And the city were kind enough to let that happen. So they essentially, every Saturday and Sunday over the summer, they were shutting down this bridge and letting these people have this space. So, you know, cities get bigger, but often, you know, there are solutions for providing for the public within a city. You just have to be creative. And that's why we really love this example. And this is the other thing, like, I'm probably like teasing people a little bit, because it's very hard to imagine, you know, what like a festival on a bridge right now when we're dealing with this pandemic, or these public spaces where everyone's gathered. But the world will return to normal, and we will, I'm sure, I mean, for me, and I'm sure for a lot of you as well, the first thing we're going to want to do is really be around other people. And this is this idea in urban design that we really, really appreciate at Monocle, which is about creating spaces for people to gather, and not doing it in a way that kind of feels forced or really has a commercial mindset behind it. It's just providing for the public in clever ways. So all they've done here in London, in Coal Drop Yard is the development, which the designer Thomas Heatherwick was involved in, is they've just, you know, astroturfed a big staircase and created a space for people to relax. And there's so many good things for a city that can come out of something as simple like this. Firstly, when you're creating a space for people to gather, you're creating a sense of security for people that live there, because it's a new development. People might live there, but when you move into a new place and there's there's no one around, you can feel a little insecure. So by immediately adding foot traffic and people into a part of town, you create a sense of security. Also, this development here, it has done very well in terms of it has a lot of shops behind where these people are sitting. It's designed in a way that, yeah, you will come to Coal Drop Yard to maybe buy, you know, a new bag or some item of clothing that you want to buy, but you make a day of it. You're there with people in the city. It's a public space, and you're all enjoying it together. So for us at Monocle, we think that the more generous a mayor or an urban designer can be when they're thinking about the city, the happier the people that are in the city are going to be. And it's not necessarily about doing something that looks super fancy or super beautiful. It's just about being practical, which is not a very good segue for the next element, because this really is about doing urban design very well. And if you go to a city like Copenhagen, which often gets these, you know, awards for the world's most livable city, the reason it does is because of good urban design. So Jan Gehl was the famous urbanist who's, you know, done a lot of work in encouraging people to think about the city as a public place, as a place for everyone to enjoy and share and together. But beyond his initial ambitions, the city has just become such a strong place, a strong environment for urban designers, for landscape architects. And it's very, very easy to just walk around a neighborhood in Copenhagen and just see such clever things. For example, on the left, a new building was created that kind of blocked, I guess, a bit of a path in the city. So the designers made these beautiful bikeways around. So not only are you able to ride your bike from A to B, you're also able to kind of take in these magnificent views. Things like this, your daily commute, it becomes a little bit more happy because you're surrounded by, you know, smart design. So all these little touches in a place like Copenhagen that, yeah, they are to make the city an easier place to navigate. They're about making the city a better place for commerce. They're also about making people happier. They're about quality of life, and you know, that's something that we're very keen to showcase. And I think the Scandinavians do design with such a high level of polish that these environments are very enjoyable to be in. Which moves me to this final point on cities, and I think it could be the most important one. I think cities today, especially places like bigger cities, places like London, every inch of land is so what's the word? It's valuable, but it's not, the value is not just in, you know, this is a great piece of land where we can have a shop. The value needs to be in this is a great piece of land where we can make our city better and we can allow the people to flourish. And often it's these kind of, it's the creative industries that can lose out in many places, because the value of having a high-end retailer on a street in the center of London commercially might be better, and it might make more money for the developer, but actually for the people of the city, it doesn't necessarily make them any happier, and long-term, is it really that great? So what we really love in Monocle to talk about, and it still exists in cities today, is this idea of kind of keeping creativity really at the center of the city. And whether that is something like this project here, which is this amazing furniture maker, which has been able to occupy a space in downtown Toronto because of, you know, a landlord that said, look, if we're if we're going to have a development here, part of this development, it shouldn't just be places to eat and places to shop. It should be places to make. And because of that, there's such a strong community that's being kind of created around this one workshop. And it could be that. It could be something like physical making the city. We also, I think fashion is something that has kind of been driven out of the city in terms of manufacturing. I mean, New York, for example, has an incredible garment making district, but also that land is in Manhattan. It becomes too valuable for fashion shops to be there, fashion makers to be there. And our approach is, yes, sure, cities have to develop, things have to change, but if you sacrifice the creativity, the making, the manufacturing, you lose a lot of value at the same time. So that's why we really like to kind of champion this idea of creativity in the city. And then to end, I just wanted to kind of, as a journalist, I mean, my job isn't really to design better cities or create better homes or be an interior designer. My job is to ask questions to people who know a lot more about design than me, a lot of people who are a lot more creatively minded than me, and try and kind of figure out what the solutions are going forward. And these are kind of questions I like to ask to every designer, and I think are really, really important right now. And hopefully maybe you can take a little bit of value from, I think, this first idea about how do we design when our cities are getting bigger and the world is getting hotter? Because essentially we can't continue to, create cities in a way in developing countries that, are about cramming as many people in as possible, building with bad materials, filling everything up with air conditioning, and using a huge amount of power. We have to be more creative in the way that we think about the city, and whether that's encouraging buildings like the Brisbane example, which offer a better solution in terms of allowing air to pass through and not needing air conditioning, or just the idea of greening cities and creating buildings that have trees in them, have green walls, have things going up them. There are ideas out there. They're not all super expensive. So how do we build better cities? The second one is a little bit more pandemic related, I think, and it's this idea about how do we redesign the way we live together. I think a lot of people in the world who've been stuck at home have realized maybe their living situation is not so nice. Maybe the traditional idea of a share house where everyone has these tiny bedrooms and there's a kitchen, maybe that's not as nice as a housing cooperative where the house has been designed so that you have your own space. You might even have your own bathroom, but you still have that connection with people. And it's certainly the same way for people who live alone. How do you kind of create a housing situation where you have your privacy, but at the same time you have that daily interaction? And we're seeing a lot of amazing, I guess, co-living projects coming about that offer that sort of inspiration. The next one is something that I think is kind of difficult to explain, but very important, and that's this idea of this design thinking beyond the design industry. Design at the end of the day is problem solving. It's about looking at something and designing a solution out of it. And fair enough, at Monocle, we look at it from the position of how do you make a better city? How do you design a better city? But it can be applied in so many different ways. How do you create a better business? How do you create a more sustainable business? How do you use the thinking of design to solve these problems? And I think that it's already becoming more mainstream, I guess, in other industries. And I think designers have a big responsibility to push that even further. So it's not even a question. It's, you're a big player, you're a big company, you're thinking about your sustainability strategy, you're employing good designers to help you tease out the best way to do it and the most efficient way to do it. And then a couple more points, and then I guess I'll hand over to questions. But the other thing I think is very important to talk about is how do we design for our environment and rather than designing against it. I guess most of us, or some of us like myself, kind of grew up around in the 90s and late 80s when the idea about architecture was creating this big, testament to great engineering and great architecture and showing how big and bold we can be with design. And now you look back at those ideas and you think, wow, that's not a very smart way to think, actually. Really, we should be thinking about how we use design to appreciate all the best aspects of nature. And we've ended up in big cities, big concrete jungles that don't facilitate that. And I think the way that good design is heading now is looking a lot more about making the most of this precious environment around us and designing with it and taking ideas from it, and using them to create better architecture. And then finally, a question that maybe I shouldn't ask because it might take me out of a job, but this idea of, do we need design at all? And I'm not talking about what am I talking about? I'm not talking about, like I was saying before, creative thinking and using good design ideas to inform better ideas about the way we do business or the way we make things. I'm talking about, do we need to bring so many new products into the world? Should our most talented creative people be working in companies where they're churning out a brand new mobile device every 2 years to replace the last one, which still worked very, very well? So there's definitely a question there about circularity in design, about this idea of, when we think about making a new thing, how do we think about its full life in terms of, it's created, it's bought, it lives with someone, it's part of their life, and then what happens after that? Can it be recycled? Is it sustainable to do this? Do we even need it at all? So that's a question I think a lot of designers right now are asking themselves, and I think in the future we're going to see a lot of kind of creativity and innovation around it. And that's basically it from me. So I'll hand back over to you guys.
Thank you very much, Nolan. It was great listening to you, especially the part about urban design, which is a big problem here in Bulgaria. And I switched directly to our questions from the audience. And the first question is connected to this. It's from Vesi Andreeva. Can you talk a bit about your views about Bulgaria and design in regard to the things you mentioned in your talk? I don't know if you are familiar with Bulgaria, of course. Please tell us if you have ever been to the country.
I sadly haven't been to Bulgaria. One of our previous employees at Monocle, a girl called Nelly, was from there. So I've heard a little bit about it. But maybe what might be better is maybe to talk about some of the problems. You can maybe just brief me on some of the problems you have, and maybe I can refer to other examples of cities where they've been solved.
One of the biggest problems, I think, is that, like you mentioned in your talk, it's better to reuse architecture and buildings than to demolish them and start new buildings. And this is a big topic at the moment in Bulgaria. So maybe we need some tips how to talk to our politicians and the people who govern in Bulgaria, and to the architects probably. But this is quite big problem, and a lot of buildings which are cultural heritage are being destroyed. And we see then new buildings popping up, and they're not that good at all.
It's one of those things. It's very tricky, but I think it takes essentially, it's a property developer. It takes a property developer to be brave with a concept in the beginning, because so often in a place, I think in Tbilisi in Georgia, for example, there's a hotelier there who has taken on like an old and beautiful building, and instead of knocking it down, he's made the most of what's there to create something that's super beautiful, that is appreciative of this old, amazing industrial Soviet building they have there. And people love it and people come to it. And then everyone else in the city, a lot of other developers kind of clock on to the fact that, well, actually there's some value here. And I mean, the most convincing argument is essentially that you can save money if you do these developments well. If you take an old building and breathe some life into it and draw on its existing architecture and the merits of its architecture, then it's worth preserving. So there are a number of arguments, but it's just like dominoes. It's like the one thing falls and then another. I mean, for example, just quickly, where I'm from in Australia, the Gold Coast, they have this incredible, heritage of mid-century buildings, lots of holiday hotels that were made in the 50s and 60s that developers would just knock down because it was more efficient for them to build a bigger, better, new, shiny hotel. And it was only really when the people of the city started to really promote their love of these buildings, and restaurants would open, and new buildings would be created in the style of these 1950s and 60s buildings that people kind of clocked on. But there's no easy answer, but I think it can be grassroots, and I think there are examples of people working very hard to save buildings in cities. But I do agree it's tough, but I think it's worthwhile. And I think if you're trying to convince any sort of developer or politician who wants to kind of prioritize the economy, you have to show how you can reuse a building in a valuable way.
Okay, continuing with this line of thought, we have another question. I'm sorry. This is from Sirma Penkova. Improving urban design depends largely on the municipality. Do you have any good examples of how citizens can participate in the improvement of urban design on their own?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Budapest example was a good one, because they've really struggled in that city, because it's obviously a beautiful place. They obviously have a tough political situation, and then they have this, I guess, the city has become such a playground for people from London or whatever to come and have their like bachelor parties, and it's really like culturally things were tough for them there. And through this initiative of basically taking over this bridge, they reclaimed something back for themselves, and they were able to create a space. I mean, when I visited, I was a journalist there. Everyone else that was using that space were locals, and I think it's this thing about locals kind of taking the place over and showing their appreciation for it. And I think it does work. I think if 500 people are queuing up to get on this bridge, the city is going to take notice and think, oh wow, this is something of value to them. But yeah, it's a tricky subject. I don't know what the right answer is. I think right now more than ever, we are in a position where we can use the internet, and we can use forums like this to raise awareness and to gather followings. And I think with enough people behind something, because often it's an awareness thing, sometimes politicians just don't realize how much a part of the city means to other people that live there. And sometimes it's as simple as just raising that awareness. But it takes a lot of people and a lot of collaboration and goodwill.
Okay, the next question is a little bit easier.
Okay, good.
A lifestyle question. Has the pandemic changed how you perceive your own home? This is a question from Eva Yaneva.
Yeah, I 100% think it's changed how most people think about their home. I think, if anything, we realize the value in having things that make us feel good at home, and I can't see anything negative about the effects that the pandemic has had in terms of making home design better. There's people, for example, that I really admire, designers like Ilse Crawford in the UK. She has a beautiful kind of apartment above the studio of her design office, which is no longer kind of, there's no one there because everyone's working from home or whatever. And this time has really allowed her to think about so many good ideas about making the home better and what sort of spaces we need. She said that even though she has this lovely home, she ends up spending a lot of the time on her husband on the fire escape stairs, because it's this access to nature. And I think for developments that she's working on going forward, she's always going to be pushing a lot harder for shared outdoor spaces, communal spaces. I think like people in London, especially where I was living, really fell in love with their balconies. They realized like, wow, this is maybe something I didn't appreciate before, but something so integral to how I want to live. And they've beautified these spaces. So I think it's great people like myself and designers have realized, but also in a way it's good because a lot of developers, people who are actually commissioning and building these buildings, they've been stuck at home too. And they've been thinking, why don't I have a bigger balcony? Like they're really realizing that the cost cutting in housing development is it's not always a good thing.
Okay, Maria Georgieva asks, what do you think the empty offices will turn into?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think it's so interesting. I think that hopefully they'll turn into better offices for the people that want to go back to work. I think we can't live in a world where we say everything is going to change and we're all going to work from home and everything's going to be done on Zoom. I mean, I would so much, as much as it's nice to have this conversation now, I would so much rather be sitting down with you guys in person and talking to everyone in the room, and kind of, you get a better understanding of everything when you're around other people. So I don't think that office design, offices will be completely taken away and these spaces are going to be empty, but I think they will adapt. And we've seen so many interesting concepts about how builders can change. And essentially, like I was talking about before, it's about money, and it's about how much a place is worth. And I think that you can be quite creative in the way you share a space. You can have an amazing kind of cafeteria situation in the morning that's serving coffee and people are sitting there doing work. And in the evening, it can be taken over by a completely different business. I think what will happen is that the model will become more flexible, and we'll be more happy to share an office space and use it as a more of a social environment whenever we want. And when we leave at 6 o'clock, we're happy for someone else who's doing something different to take over that space. So I think, if anything, we're just going to see a lot more flexibility in that. And I think developers are already clocking on to that and thinking about, like, if we have this space, we kind of don't want it to ever be dead. We don't want it to be left overnight. What can we do at night here? So I think offices will change, and I think they'll definitely be more flexible. And this idea of having our own space and our own desk and our own office maybe won't be as prominent as it was in the past.
Okay, another question. For the moment, I think this is the last question. Sustainability and reusage are obviously closely related. What about creative reuse of furniture and other interior decoration items? Will your magazine support setting this as a trendy new trend? It's a question from Dani Rashev.
Yeah, I mean, I'm completely obsessed with flat pack furniture. I think this is the future for me anyway, because we live our lives in a very different way. I think younger people especially, we do move a lot more. And, we can talk about having a beautiful old Danish chair in our house, and it's a good investment forever. But yeah, it's hard to move this big chunky chair around the world if you've got a job in Sofia, and then your next job's in London, and then your next job's in New York. And IKEA is, in a way, it's done a lot of good things as a company, and I don't necessarily like the idea of throwaway furniture, but they've shown that furniture can pack down into nothing, and more designers now are creating furniture that can be flat packed, that you can screw and build yourself, and then when you move, and it's a beautiful piece of furniture, and it could be Danish. There's a really amazing brand that people should check out called Takt, T-A-K-T, and they do incredible fold away flat pack furniture. So this is, I mean, you say, like, is it something we're going to cover in Monocle, like sustainable furniture design? I think it's like the thing I want to be covering the most going forward, because that's one aspect of it, but then there's also the aspect of better materials. How can we create leathers that are better for the planet? How can we create the insides of sofas and furnitures it's the material, the polyurethane is not good for the planet. There's so many different aspects of furniture design and material design and textile design that are changing so quickly. It's like super exciting. It's like one of the most exciting aspects, I think, of the design industry, because it does affect all of us. We all want to sit on a couch when we go home at the end of the day.
Okay, Nolan, thank you very much for answering so honestly and nicely to all of the questions, because it's almost 8 o'clock in Bulgaria and everybody's preparing for dinner. We shall wrap it up. And thank you once again for making it to our Melba Live 13 edition. I would like to ask you one just tiny little question before we close the conversation.
I've got loads of time, so people can just log off.
Okay. Well, they can just have a glass of wine before.
Exactly.
So what do you prepare for your next episode of Monocle on Design?
Oh my God, no, that's a really tough question. No, it's very much along the lines of some of the things we talked about tonight. So for the radio show, we're going to do 2 shows in a row. And we thought, let's do a show about like this idea of design to last. Like how should we design things to last? And we were like, let's So we're going to talk to like this Australian architect who builds the most like indestructible buildings in Antarctic. And it's about how you design for the weather. And then we've got an interview with someone from North Face who's talking about designing for clothes. So we're doing one episode of like designing to last. How do we make things that, you know, have a good lifespan? And then the other show is going to be designing not to last. I think that's a bad title. We'll work on the title, but essentially it's about how to design or what sort of design is temporary. And it's really interesting for us to talk about because there's a designers in the UK called Barbara and Oscarby, and they've created this amazing chair called the On and On chair. And basically it's made out of a material that once you have had enough of the chair, you can take it back to the manufacturer and it can be melted down and used again and again. So it's essentially, it's not designed to last forever, but it has this continuing lifespan. And then obviously we talk about mobile phones and, you know, why we're designing phones that only last 2 years when, you know, it's such an important thing in our life, and how do we do this better, and et cetera, et cetera. So some exciting episodes on the way. It's a lot of fun making the design radio show.
That's great. And one question from me: I'm more interested in your profession. If you prefer more the radio shows or the editorial work, because we both with Adriana have an editorial background. We used to work for a cultural magazine, and the whole team was we're really big fans of Monocle, so we followed the magazine for a long time, and that's why I'm interested, because for me editorial work is much more interesting.
Yeah.
But with the podcasts are more popular at the moment, so probably this is the future. I don't know.
I mean, you said you were going to put this on YouTube, so now I'm worried that one of my bosses will watch it I think I can be diplomatic. I mean, the reason I love doing the radio so much is that when you speak to a designer, when you show a piece of design, people can look at the photo of the chair or the car or whatever it is and be like, oh, that's beautiful, or I don't like that. They make an opinion based on a photograph. When you talk to a designer, they can talk to you for like an hour about like one join in something. They have so much passion that sometimes their work is like, it's just the final part of such a deep and meaningful thing that, you know, they spent years of their life developing. So when you actually speak to them for a radio interview, even though you can't see what they're talking about, the way they speak about it is so passionate. It's amazing. So I love that. But at the same time, I also love the creating the magazine, because it's definitely not just me who's doing it. It's a team effort for every story, because we're always thinking about how the photographs are going to be, how we will design it to look good on page, what makes the right story. And it's a big team effort. And luckily Monocle is like a nice place to work with a very nice team of people who are quite creative. So for me personally, I just love like nerding out on the design conversations with people who are a lot more creative and smart than me. And then I think for rewarding and career-wise, I think creating a magazine is such a good thing. So that didn't really answer your question. I'm sorry.
It's good like that. Thank you, Nolan.
No, but you have such an amazing and an exciting work and responsibility, being the mediator between the amazing work of the professional designers, architects, and then putting it into context and somehow like digesting it and curating it to the general audience so that they can have this feel towards the towards this profession. So it's a great job that you do.
Yeah, but that's what I love about working for Monocle, because I don't have a design, like you said before, I started as a music journalist. I don't have a design background. And I think the nice thing about Monocle is that when we're talking about design or architecture, we're not doing it in such a way that anyone can understand. It's like we're not architecture. It's not an architecture magazine, and we have to use all these words related to the profession. Our job is to kind of take a very clever architect's really good idea and make it readable for, you know, someone who might be a banker or who might be a ceramicist or whatever. So that's the kind of the fun part about Monocle. We take subjects that are specialized, and we make it more generalized, and it's a very nice way to do things.
Yeah, we hope to meet you somewhere in Europe or around the world sometime live.
Well, I have to solve all Sophia's problems with the properties being knocked down, so I'll come over soon.
Yeah.
No, I'd love to come over, and yeah, it'd be great to stay in touch.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, and
thank you very much.
Hour with us.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a lovely night.
Thank
Bye.
you.